This conference will now be recorded.
There we go, now recorded. So let's go through today's agenda. We've got quite a good selection of sessions and presenters today. Quick overview of the agenda. We're going to go through our more informal welcome and introductions just in a minute. Session one is we've got Michael Paul doing a when direct object storage isn't so direct. Next session we've got a vendor session, object first, very much the nuker on the block, or should that be the nuker on the object. Veeam storage, traditions and roots within Veeam, so going to be a really good, interesting technical discussion on there. Then we've got Michael Cade, who promises to have a really interesting session here about where Veeam is today. You know, virtualization was just the start. Really looking forward to that session. Then a subject close to everyone's heart in this day and age, security, and by way of that, immutability. Ian Sanderson's going to do us a little session on that. And then later on, if you're a Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 user, I'd suggest you hang around for this session. Karinne's going to talk about version 8, some of the things that are coming up on version 8, some of the features, really nice things coming away. And then lastly, we just got a final roundup, Q&A, and a bit more information about what's coming down the line from us. So let's move on to welcome and introductions. So just before we start, rules of engagement for today are: first rule of Veeam User Group, please talk about Veeam User Group. There's a URL coming up at the bottom of this slide, links you to the community forum for the UK group. Please, please, please click on the link, join the community if you haven't already, and join in the conversations there. Lots of great content and lots of great help and discussions going on there. Hopefully a lot are generated from today. What the Veeam User Group is, it's about end user involvement. So this is about you today. So please try and make it as interactive, ask questions, get involved in discussions, etc. It's all about dialogue, you, the community, and knowledge sharing. What it's not is basically a free-for-all for. I always like to put this in as a disclaimer because we're not really here to do the hard sell. This is a user group by users for users. Exactly, that's what we're going on today. And there's the forum link. Click on, check out the forum link, head on over there, sign up if you're not already a member, and join the discussions. Ask away questions. There's no such thing as silly questions, it's just silly answers sometimes. But get on over there and get involved. So, quick introduction about the UK Veeam User Group. We had our first meeting and was established way back in 2016. Our first meeting was in Edinburgh. It was piggybacked on one of the Veeam technical roadshows. And back then we even featured, at that point in time, Michael Cade and his systems engineering role as part of that. We then quickly followed that up by having an in-person event in Manchester in 2017. That's when we brought on Ian Sanderson, which we'll go over in a minute. And then we jumped down further south to London. We had 2 meetings in London in 2018. We had one in March and we had one in September. The idea behind the user group was then, one, we wanted to kind of emulate what the VMware user group was like, you know, bring users together, make it a big in-person event. But also, the idea was to bring it around the country. So that's why we started in Edinburgh and worked our way south. So we had, you know, easy access for everyone, for all the users around the UK. So, introduce myself. My name is Craig Dalrymple. I was one of the original UK Veeam User Group leaders back in 2016. Like I say, we established it trying to get the emulating VMware user group, etc. And back then we had 3 leaders. There was myself, we had Nick Farnell, who now works for Veeam, and we had James Kilby, who now works for VMware. Fast forward to 2017, and we recognised we needed a bit extra help, an extra pair of hands. So we brought on Ian Sanderson as an additional UK Veeam user group leader. 2018, we had our 2 events, and then we kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. And then there was just a little thing that got in the way of, you know, this global pandemic, COVID, that was in between there and then. We had a meeting last year, a virtual meeting last year, and then we realised we needed a bit of extra blood, fresh pair of legs, fresh pair of hands to help out behind the scenes. So that's when we brought on Michael Paul as our 3rd leader as part of that. So Michael is on the call. This is a nice little introduction. Michael, do you want to take a little bit of time here to introduce yourself to the good folks, tell them your history of Veeam, etc.?
Sure thing. Hey everyone. So yeah, I'm a principal consultant, been working with Veeam now for over a decade. Yeah, I thought, why go for a serious photo? Let's have a bit of fun. So Part of the Veeam 100 group have been since the original intake of Veeam Legends, as well as holding Vanguard in recent years. And yeah, one of the photos you see in there is kind of the after hours, some of the fun that we have at the Veeam 100 Summit. So yeah, you'll find me as the guy with the dad bod and the dad jokes, and I also am one to never really shut up. So yeah, I'll go back over to you, Craig, before I start stealing the mic for the next 20 minutes.
Thank you for that, and you're on time for once. Yeah, that's good. Thanks
There
for
we
that.
go.
Okay, so a nice segue actually, Michael's introduction, and then we're going to introduce you into Michael's session here. You'll notice on each of the session headers as we go through today, we've got a QR code for a link to the dedicated forum posts to discuss, have a conversation, feedback, etc. on each of the sessions. For those who don't like QR codes or are very suspicious of QR codes, it's not going to take you to my Bitcoin wallet to make a deposit. Short URL, bit.ly URL there as well, if you'd rather go about it that way. So with that, Michael, I will over to you.
Okay. Right. So in a few moments, everyone should see my slide deck. If I can just get a little thumbs up from someone here that we are live.
We are live.
Perfect. Okay, right. So yeah, let's get this underway then, everyone. So of course, GoToMeeting wants to pop up in front of everything here. Let's get that out of the way. So yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our first UK Veeam User Group event of 2024. If you are wondering why I'm up first, apart from being the newbie, it's because this way it's only going to get better. Already mentioned a little bit about myself there, so we can kind of skip through that. Today's session is going to talk more about the tech behind the marketing here. When Veeam released Veeam Data Platform V12, one of the new key features was direct object storage. Now, the concept is as simple as it sounds. You no longer need to back up to block storage. You can consume object storage as your primary backup repository. Now, this is commonly referred to within a scale-out backup repository as the performance tier. In most workloads, you can utilize object storage directly. There are, of course, a few caveats. This is the original release, but for the most part, no more tiering to block storage first. Object storage is a first-class citizen as such. So, let's be honest here, this would be the world's worst presentation if there wasn't kind of a gotcha that I wanted to talk about. We'd call it a day, we move on to the next presenter, but there is a gotcha, and this is going to be the focus of today's topic. Sometimes the phrase direct to object storage is misleading, and let's get straight to it. So I want to keep things as simple as possible here. What we're going to talk about, this would apply to virtual machine backups as well, but for just visual simplicity, I'm going to use Veeam Agents. It gives us the most examples of what we need to consider, and I don't need to draw unnecessary extras such as proxy servers. I'm going to keep this presentation very visual, and if you've got any questions, fire them away in the chat, and I'll try to get around to them at the end, kind of time permitting. Got a bit of a bet going on with Ian and Craig that as long as I don't overrun, I'm not buying them drinks next time I see them. So let's see if I can stick to it. So when we think of a Veeam agent backing up as direct object storage, what comes to mind? Well, for most, it's the example on screen now. Now, feel free to laugh at how comically simple this is, but that is the idea. We're backing up to storage. I'm going to make it slightly more technical in nature, so let's throw the port that we're communicating on in here. So this is what we're expecting. Now, what do we expect when we restore from object storage? Are you guys ready for another painfully simple diagram? Well, no, you're not getting another diagram. It's the same one because we still initialize the connection from the Veeam agent. Object storage is just that, storage. We don't have any compute that we can utilize there, but this is it. We expect to pull data directly back from object storage to our Veeam agent, and that's the end of the matter. I'm going to give credit to the Veeam teams here. If you are using a standalone Veeam agent, this is exactly how it works. You might be sensing the incoming but here, and you'd be right, but it's not always so simple. And when is that the case? Let's find out. So enter Veeam backup and replication. This will probably sound like common sense when I say this, but an object storage backup repository is still a Veeam backup and replication backup repository. So when you're interacting with object storage that is attached to Veeam backup and replication as a repository, you might not be talking directly to this anymore. When we add an object storage repository into Veeam, we hit a very important setting early on in the configuration that's very easy to overlook. So we start off creating our object storage repository as normal. We give it a name, description, optionally we specify the number of concurrent tasks. Then we move on to the account screen. Here we add the service point, the credentials, and right at the bottom, connection mode. And this setting is critical for how your object storage is consumed. You've got two modes here, direct and gateway. And if you choose direct, then your Veeam agents might back up directly, and more to come on this shortly. But if you choose gateway, all of your Veeam agent backups will have to flow their traffic via one or more gateways back to object storage. Now, there are some pros to using the gateway setting. If I had a bunch of physical servers all writing to, say, object storage that's over the far side of a WAN link, it might make sense to centralize their WAN egress to a couple gateways, and then I could perform, say, WAN bandwidth shaping at that point to prevent saturating my WAN links. If I've got agents on endpoint devices distributed across the country or even further afield, you likely won't want to pull that data into your data center first via the gateways, unless your object storage is located on premises. At that point, your traffic's likely traversing a VPN anyway, and it's not necessarily going to need bandwidth shaping at a gateway level regardless. Now, if you recall in the previous insultingly simple slide we looked at, we had a single outbound network port from our agent to object storage. Now, in case you've forgotten, let me remind you, it was HTTPS that we were using, otherwise known as TCP 443. However, this changes when we introduce gateway mode. Suddenly, our agent is not talking directly to object storage over this port anymore. But furthermore, the agent is not actually using this port at all. This is because we're now talking to a Veeam gateway server, which means we need to start talking to the Veeam software components on that gateway. So going back to our insultingly simple diagram here, we see a little bit more going on than last time. Now we've got two connections taking place between three endpoints. We've got our Veeam agent communicating to the Veeam gateway server, and that's using a destination port of TCP between 2,500 to 3,300. And then the Veeam gateway server role is accepting this traffic, and it's opening a second connection, which is to our object storage endpoint, and it's using TCP 443. So if you're going to change connection types, be sure to validate your firewall rules will support this end-to-end, or suddenly you're going to find your backups failing. Now, that's enough talk on the backup side of things for now. We've got some further points that I'm going to dive into a bit later, but I want to change gears. We're going to talk about recovery. So, recovery. Let's start with the essential part. There isn't a direct versus gateway discussion for backup data restoration. For a Veeam backup and replication server's backup repository, there is only one component, the mount server. This component is not optional. If you look at the screenshot above, you will find that you must select a mount server from a dropdown. If you don't, the default of the VBR server is going to be used. For context, the mount server is used when we're performing file level recovery for Veeam agents, and it's also used for other purposes such as application item restores. I don't want to go too far off piece on here, so I'll just say, look, consult the Veeam documentation for more details on that. So let's go back to the mount server role, and this is where things really start to unravel for our direct object storage story. Most upsettingly, our insultingly simple diagram starts to get a little less simple. Did I say little? I meant a lot less simple. So let's start off by introducing our VBR server and our mount server and how they communicate. The mount server will talk to the VBR server on port 9401, and the VBR server, it's a bit port hungry and decides to talk to our mount server on TCP ports between 2500 and 3300. Also, it uses a 6160, 6162, 6170, and a dynamic RPC port from the range of 49,152 to 65,535. Don't try to remember them all, it's in Veeam's documentation. Now, I've omitted port 445 from the diagram as it's just used for deploying components, not strictly for our recovery scenario we're talking about right now. Next up, we've got the communication to the object storage itself. When utilizing a gateway, as you'd expect, we've got to talk to the gateway components, same as when an agent performed a backup. So we're going to use TCP 2500 to 3300 with the gateway server talking to object storage over port 443, as we'd expect. But now what happens if I'm using direct mode instead of the gateway? How do we talk to the object storage? Is it the mount server? Is it the VBR server? Well, it is the mount server that actually facilitates that communication. And then finally, with all this data flying around, so many ports, well, what about the agent itself? It's again an assortment of TCP 2500 to 3300, and depending on the OS, for Windows, it's TCP 135, 445, 6160, 11731, 6173, dynamic RPC ports. For Linux, it's just port 22 extra. But you get the idea, there's a huge volume of different ports going on here. And, but wait, there's more. We also need to make sure that the VBR server can talk to the Veeam agent. And again, we've got TCP 2500 to 3300. And that's it. I wasn't kidding when I said this wasn't as simple. And if you thought that was a long explanation, it still took a lot longer to research, packet capture to validate, and then animate all this on screen. So hopefully you're still awake after all that. And if your head's hurting after taking it in, well, here's a helpful remedy. Your mount server does not need to be a separate server to your Veeam agent. If the Veeam agent machine is running Windows, as of the time of this presentation, Linux servers can't be mount servers. If you find yourself in a scenario whereby you've got a few branch office servers that require protecting with Veeam agents, it might be suitable to utilize themselves as a mount server also. Remember, this is mainly for file level recovery. So it won't prevent ourselves accessing backups if we needed to do a bare metal recovery and the mount server's unavailable. This way, we've got far fewer components in play. If you are using your Veeam agent server as the mount server and communicating to object storage directly, it really simplifies down that diagram we just looked at. You've only got to worry about your agent server talking to VBR and to the object storage. It simplifies the number of ports dramatically. So, before we continue our exploration into agents and object storage, I am going to give one more piece of advice that kind of hints at where our next topic is going. When you define your backup schedule for Veeam agent, assuming you're working with Windows or Linux, you get two options. You can define a backup job that is managed by the backup server, or a backup policy that is managed by the Veeam agent itself. A lesser known fact here is that this decision also impacts your ability to access the local Veeam recovery binaries on the endpoint you've deployed the Veeam agent to. If you create a backup job that is managed by Veeam Backup and Replication, your file level recoveries must follow the workflow that I was just hurting your brain talking about. But if you create a backup policy that is then managed by the Veeam agent, you can still utilize the file level recovery on the VBR server, but you can also, via the Veeam agent endpoint directly, utilize the local file level recovery binaries, and you can perform restores directly via object storage, and it simplifies back down to the original insultingly simple diagram we looked at of just connecting straight to object storage on 443. No mount servers, no VBR servers required. Now, we are steamrolling through the presentation, but there's one final scene that I just need to set before we can pull everything together. I want to lay the foundations for backup repository access permissions and specifically talk about IAM STS. So we've got an understanding of everything that's going to be contained in the final slides. When creating an object storage backup repository within VBR, if you were to navigate to the backup infrastructure view and select the object repository and then click on the access permissions, you'll be greeted by the configuration settings that are currently on screen. If we cast our minds back to when we first looked at backing up data to object storage, we saw two connection modes, direct and gateway. And I mentioned if you utilize direct, your agent might communicate directly to object storage. This is an important setting behind the scenes that governs the ability to utilize direct or gateway backups. You might be looking at the screen and thinking, well, can't count. I've mentioned direct, I've mentioned gateway, but we've got three options on screen here. And this is because we've got two ways we can permit direct connectivity for backups. And let's kind of go through all the options on screen. So the first one, agents share credentials to object storage repository. It is a direct connectivity mode. It's commonly termed insecure direct mode, and more on that shortly. The second option is called provided by the backup server. This is also referred to as secure indirect mode. And finally, we have provided by IAM STS object storage capabilities, also referred to as secure direct mode. So before we continue, now these settings are only factored in when we consider a managed by agent backup job or a Veeam Cloud Connect object storage target. Now, for the obvious question, well, why? And to help answer the question and expand on the topic at the same time, let's return to the first setting here. Agents share credentials to object storage, aka insecure direct mode. Well, let's ask another question. How is this insecure? Well, don't we share credentials commonly within Veeam backup and replication? Of course we do. But the reason this might be considered insecure is because we might want to silo our data. If we consider that the access key that we use for object storage can see your entire bucket, if you are backing up workstations, would you want a user endpoint, commonly considered to be the high-risk vulnerable entity, to have access to all of your backups? Even if using immutability, any unencrypted backups could be stolen to extort a ransom. What data do you think your HR, head of finance, or CEO might have on their own machine? If you're granting access to that entire bucket to every endpoint, you're introducing a lot more vectors by which data could be stolen. And this isn't a problem for us when we use the second option, gateway, because the gateway has the connection to object storage and passes the data through it, meaning the agent never actually sees the contents of the repository directly. Again, however, this might not scale, this might not be a desirable configuration. So what do? Well, if we use the IAM STS capabilities of your object storage, be it S3, Azure, GCP, or S3 compatible, functionality exists within Veeam to segment the data. Utilizing STS, we can generate a folder per agent backup, and using our master account, we generate STS tokens for each agent, and we grant them permissions only to their own data, and it prevents unnecessary data exposure. So with the scene set in the background there, we've got 5 minutes left on the clock here. So let's now start to pull all this together and see how this fits. So I've tried to make something a bit more simple and digestible as an output. So let's answer the question posed at the beginning. When is a backup that is direct to object storage actually direct to object storage? And here we have it. If you're using a standalone Veeam agent, you're always going to be communicating directly. If your Veeam agent is managed by an agent job policy, then your object access controls will determine the communication path. If you use secure or insecure direct access modes, then you'll be communicating directly to object storage. And if you specify provided by the backup server, then you'll traverse a gateway. Finally, if your agent is managed by the backup server, then if you specify direct, you'll communicate directly to the object storage. And if you specify gateway, you'll communicate via the gateway. Simple enough, right? Well, that last slide might make you think that my presentation was a little bit overkill, but we're not over yet. Let's talk about when data is directly from object storage. We've got an extra scenario here, and this screen is purely focused on the file level recovery aspects. Our extra scenario is whether we use the binaries on the agent endpoint to start a restore or the VBR server. Standalone is direct from object storage, of course. If we use the agent job policies and we initiate the restore from the agent machine, then the data is fetched directly when using secure or insecure direct access mode. And when using indirect access mode, we go via the gateway server. But if we start attempting a recovery via the VBR server, then even if we use direct mode for object storage, the data has to traverse the mount server. For example, in direct mode, the agent endpoint reads the data directly, passes the data to the mount server, and then it's passed back to the agent endpoint. And when we use indirect mode, the gateway server connects to the object storage, passes the data to the mount server, and then sends it over to the agent endpoint using SMB or SSH, depending on Windows or Linux. Continuing on, if we've got our agent job managed by Veeam backup and replication, then if we attempt a file level restore, we have two data flows depending on whether we use direct or gateway. With direct restore, we'll not be fetching the data directly via the agent endpoint. It'll be the mount server that connects to the object storage. And when we use the gateway, it is the gateway that connects to the object storage and then filters any data back to the agent endpoint via the mount server as normal. Well, why is this? Because when we're talking direct to the object storage, it's relevant to which component. We're thinking of this Veeam agent connecting to object storage for a recovery, but no, we actually we want to mount the backup and peruse it for our files. So it is the mount server that is going directly. So here we go. Final slide time. We've discussed FLR. What about bare metal recovery? This is a bit more simple, as we don't have to worry about, whether we're initiating an FLR from the agent or the VBR. We have to initiate from the endpoint because we're using the Windows recovery environment. If we connect directly to object storage as a repository, instead of selecting the Veeam backup repository, we'll communicate directly to the object storage. If we specify that it's actually a Veeam backup repository and it's defined as direct mode, then it's going to be via the mount server that we connect to object storage. And finally, with the gateway option selected within the backup repository, we'll connect via the gateway server to object storage. So 1 in 3 of these modes gets us directly to object storage. And that's everything from me. It's a huge amount of firewall rules to consider. So effectively, yeah, I just hope that when you are working on your designs for direct to object storage, that you can now factor in all the various different data flows and make sure that your firewall rules hit this from day one. Thank you everyone for staying awake. If you've got any questions on this session, please feel free to continue the discussion over in the Veeam community. I'm pretty much bang on time. If there's any questions in the chat, I'll try to answer them with that. And with that, I'm gonna hand back to Craig.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent session, as we always expect from you. Always good details, and most importantly, on time. Good man. Right.
There was beer at stake this time.
Cider in your case. So let's go back to that. So next up, we're going to move on to, we've got our vendor session. I'm going to make, Maxim, if you're on the chat, stand by. We're going to make you presenter, get your slides ready, and we're going to fire it up. Any questions we had? Don't see any questions. There was a bit of discussion about who was using direct object at the moment, and Ian picked up a good point. A next finish install can just work, but there's a lot more to consider, and Michael's session certainly proved exactly that. So, right, I'm going to make Maxim presenter. Here we go. Stand by. Boop. There he is.
Hey, Craig, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you okay. Just want to make sure
Great.
you've got your screen ready to go. I'm going to make you presenter now.
And I can share the screen. Great.
There you go.
Hold on a second.
No worries. No worries. I'll just remind everyone again, we've got the links to the community forum post that you can carry on the conversation about either Michael's or, but in this case, we're going to look at Maxim's. So head on over there if you have more detailed questions, etc. We can do a little bit more conversation or feedback on the sessions in there as well.
Yep. So now you should be able to see the presentation, right?
Oh, good.
Okay. So I'll be quite short about myself. My name's Max. I worked at Veeam for 6 years. My last 2 years I spent as a cloud solutions architect together with Luca, Peter, and Artyom. So if they will watch this recording, I want to say hi to them. Yeah, so would-be appliance has been invented by the same founders of Veeam, by Ratmir and Andrei, with the vision to deliver the best storage for Veeam, which will be ransomware proof and immutable out of the box, which sits with the principle of zero trust data resilience, which is really important these days for ransomware recoveries and for infrastructure hardening. You shouldn't trust anyone. Not any intruder should go into your infrastructure and escalate their privileges, right? So how we usually step into the project. Customers are looking for secure, powerful, and simple storage for their backups. And Veeam sometimes, for some specific customer, has this kind of a gap with tailoring the solution for everyone's needs. And we see a lot of different vendors who are really easy to set up. However, they are not immutable. They are powerful and might be simple like regular Windows repository, but it's insecure because all the immutability options for Windows are like workarounds. If it's something powerful and immutable, then you should have some competency over it, and it's not simple. So Ratmir and Andrei found this gap and delivered a new product to the market, the storage for Veeam Backup and Replication and for Veeam Cloud Connect. So usually you have like options for production. You use NetApp or any other storage which allows you to have like storage snapshots and other more performative capabilities. However, when we speak about the backup storage, there are not so many options. Usually we see the directly attached storages like regular Windows servers, regular Linux servers, some NAS boxes, etc., etc. I would like to point that they are not immutable, and these days it's not applicable for your best practices for data security. However, they are simple and powerful, and this is what personally I saw in the service providers, even environments, a lot of directly attached storages. Another category is dedupe appliance with immutability. It's immutable if the retention lock or immutability is in compliance mode, so even administrator cannot remove these backups. They are usually simple. However, for some vendors, you should have a certification to manage it or find a third-party consultant, which you probably might already have in place. In terms of performance and powerful columns, so it's powerful for data reduction usually, not for restores. So during the restores, you have to rehydrate the data, and it might be a disaster for full recoveries or for instant VM recoveries. So it's perfect for long term. It saves a lot of space, and not only in terms of disk consumption, but also in the rack mount. However, for recoveries, it's not really the case. Hardened Linux repository is a very efficient option. So it's for some guys, it's simple, just like directly attached storage. However, you should take into consideration some Linux best practices, like manual credentials verifications, etc., etc. In terms of security, it's hardening, not immutable, so there is a risk of privilege escalation to the root user. In terms of performance, no issues here. It's like directly attached storage, Veeam components, Veeam data mover service will be installed directly on the Linux into Linux operating system, and it will utilize all available CPU cores and RAM for backups and recoveries processing, right? The next one is object storage with S3 immutability, and I will speak for would-be appliance here. It's secure because we have S3 retention lock in compliance mode. It's simple. I will show you in the UI. It really takes 15 minutes to deploy it and make it work actually. So, and it's powerful. So we stand for some advanced integrations with Veeam Backup and Replication. I mean, smart entities and SOS API, which makes your experience really close to hardened Linux repositories in terms of performance. However, it's an object storage with all its advantages. So we speak about 1 gigabyte per second of the speeds for backups and a bit less for recoveries. So in terms of security, I would like to highlight one more thing, that it's a hardened Linux repository. Sorry, it's a hardened Linux operating system. So you don't need to take care of the operating system like with a hardened Linux repository. So you don't have root access to the operating system. It's locked from the manufacturer, from the vendor, from us. For immutability, we use S3 object lock running in compliance mode. You can enable MFA on top of that, and Veeam encryption can be and should be actually enabled. So everything as per best practices of Veeam, right? In terms of simplicity, we have a nice web UI. However, there is also a text user interface, which is accessible via IPMI, via management interface, which can be also disabled as a single checkbox. We rely on Veeam default block size of 1 megabyte. And so you don't need to take care of usual object storage considerations, like raise the block size to 4 megabyte per 4 megabyte block size and have twice the capacity needed for backups. So it's all predictable and works with Veeam default settings. And performance, I will highlight on the next slide, is for 1 megabyte block size. If you enable 4 megabyte block size, you get twice performance, but also twice size of the backups. The logic on space savings is really close to ReFS and XFS. Yeah. Cluster auto balancing is there. So object storage clusters are usually consist of nodes, and this is a major advantage against the directly attached storage. So you don't need to manage the data. It will be rebalanced while you sleep. Actually, during the non-peak hours, the data can be rebalanced and moved between the nodes. And during the backup job, since we have integration, it will be also properly sent. So if one node is very busy, the data will go to another node, and this is more about smart entities. We will talk about it later. In terms of performance, so it's up to 1 gigabyte per second of data ingest speed per node. So here we see the screenshot from Veeam Backup and Replication, and processing rate is 2 gigabytes per second. So actually, if you divide the transfer data and process data against the duration, we see that it could be even more, because we stand not for processing data, but for the write speed per node. And one cluster can consist of 4 nodes. If you need more, you just add another object storage cluster into Veeam Backup and Replication as a bucket. For recoveries, it's up to 6 megabyte per second. It's not a hard limitation. It's not the benchmark. This is what we usually see in the field. You can run up to 20 instant VM recoveries per node. So for example, if you have 200 VMs, it's 10%, and it's usually like all the critical environment you need to recover for disaster recovery procedures. So if you have a runbook, you usually define what should be recovered first, second, and third. So if you have a cluster of 4 nodes, 80 VMs are 10% of 800 VMs. Or if you need to recover just half of your environment as a single bunch, you can also stick to those values. And once again, this is not the hard limitation. It's a it's a practice, it's a best practice, what we see in the field. One more important point I would like to highlight, that we don't have a database bottleneck. So we use smart entities, we have integration with Veeam, and SOS API is utilized in full. So we don't use Cassandra DB. You don't need to take care of the cache of the network round robin configuration. We expose cache to Veeam with the SOS API. So we are Veeam Alliance, of course, and this is almost the screenshot from the Alliances page. The features you might check is Backup Target Object, Immutability, IAM-STS, and Smart Object Storage API. So Smart Object Storage API has like 2 levels of integration. First one is the capacity info, which is supported by almost anyone. That's easy. It just returns the capacity information of the cluster, right? And if you have it in object storage or in your Veeam Backup and Replication console, you will see the blue S3 bucket icon and the text like S3 integrated. However, there is another level of integration, which is the smart entity feature, which breaks Veeam Backup and Replication jobs into the chunks of virtual machines, and cache is exposed to Veeam, and that's why we don't need to have any Cassandra database in between and manage things. So we are built just for Veeam. We are not applicable for Internet of Things, for data analytics, etc., etc. We are focused on Veeam, and we have all possible integrations now and in the future as well. So SOS API feature sometimes is not applicable for each and every vendor, but we have it. Veeam Backup for M365 doesn't have SOS API capability, so it will work just as a regular storage with the degraded performance. If we compare with and without SOS API on the same appliance, we can say about 1 gigabyte per second, not gigabit, but gigabyte per second for backup with SOS API, smart entities enabled, against 100 megabytes without SOS API. So smart entities work for virtual machines of VMware, for Hyper-V jobs, for NAS share and standard S3 buckets. It will not work for AHV. It means that it will work in a regular object storage mode for M365 and for custom. So how it usually does its job. So you have the management interface, which is connected to object first cluster. So you see the S3 endpoint in full and you create buckets. However, we define the IP addresses available for Veeam Backup and Replication for read and write tasks, and this information is also kept in Veeam Backup and Replication. Since we are integrated in full, you can run it with Veeam Threat Center for sure backup verifications, for recovery orchestrator, and for Veeam One. So there is a complete visibility of your backup infrastructure when you use would-be appliance. So object storage is the technology which uses global namespaces. It has the advantage of S3 native object lock. This is a proven technology, so it has been invented probably by AWS, or they acquired someone once upon a time, and it's used in the global data centers of the largest hyperscaler, and everyone adopts it. So probably the future is after the object storage. Yeah, so if you stack it into the cluster, so you have several nodes and you stack it into the cluster, you don't need to move the data manually, even if it's immutable. You don't need to read it, write it, escalate privileges, so nothing of that. The data will be rebalanced on its own. And the SOS API is the exclusive feature starting from Veeam version 12. This is almost the date when Object First went to market. So yeah, it exposes cache to Veeam, to cache control to Veeam, and Veeam breaks large jobs into smart entities for smart placement. Also, load balancing is included. So yeah, how it works. So data goes obviously not through Veeam backup on replication, but through the proxy and gateway servers. So just like on the previous session, you learned, I believe, a lot about it. And there is a management communication within the cluster, right? So data goes directly to the node. So each node has two network interface connectors and two IP addresses, which is Veeam aware of. So if you have just one single node, you have one namespace. When you consider the data growth, you should add another node into the cluster, so it will grow. You will have larger namespace and up to 4. So that we have two sizes of would-be appliance. One is 64 terabytes, another is 128 terabytes, and you can stack them up to your needs. So 4 is the maximum number, and you can have a global namespace out of it. So what's in the box? We have a Veeam Flash Cache, so it's a super micro server. Currently, it's only super micro. We have a RAID 6 array with 10 disks, SAS drives, not an LSAS, pure SAS drives, one in spare mode, dual NIC of 10 gigs, which can be SFP plus or base T, up to your choice. Both are already in the box. And Linux operating system is on SSDs in the mirrored RAID. And let me go into my lab and show you how it looks like. We have just 5 minutes remaining. So yeah, you have this fancy web UI here. I will log here with my credentials. Okay, so yeah, everything is here. I will show you how to start your like usual workloads. So we have S3 buckets here with all the statistics on capacity. You are not limited in the number of buckets. So one bucket can be for M365, one bucket can be for Veeam backup on replication, or a bucket per tenant. So it's up to your needs. So the UI is quite limited. So I have this ransomware proof bucket. I cannot go into details of it. I cannot see the objects. I don't have also any button about permissions, like you don't need to run JSONs and assign permissions to specific users. So you have just two buttons here, create bucket and enable versioning for immutability. So this will be my bucket. Yeah, the name is not unique. Now it's unique. It will create a bucket. And then there is another option to delete the bucket. If the bucket is empty, I can simply remove it. So there is not even the generic S3 data. Even if it's immutable, it can be deleted. However, I have other buckets like this ransomware proof one. It has some data in it. And I'm an administrator. I will show you later that I'm an admin here. I cannot remove it. Well, it could be a wow, but that's just as simple as that. So if I go into settings, security, I have administrator credentials, so just one single user. We will have role-based access control in the next version, not now. So object first, just like I tapped in the very beginning, password, and that's it. You can enable MFA for it, 2FA, and SSL certificate, SSH access should be disabled by best practices, and IP address whitelisting if you would like to use it. What else is here? There is an information about the node, like how does it feel, what's inside the box in terms of the hardware, networking, disks. So here are my disks. So everything is visible, and yeah, we can just see the details and hardware specification for it. If we have some critical events, you will be notified on it. So we can see the details. The newer software version is available already, and it can be installed. All the rest of events, like who tried to delete the bucket and it was failed, for example, they are all here. Also, the capacity is here, and other critical and non-critical events. So if we go to the notifications, you can enable email notification and get them for different severity levels based on the variables here. In Veeam Backup and Replication, not something new. So you go to backup repositories, and I have just a single node, and we have a bunch of repositories. So for example, the same bucket which I tried to delete, there is a service point, which is my node credentials, which are just a 3 key. We use direct mode, and then we should define the bucket, enable immutability. So when I created the bucket, I didn't put anything about it, just enabled versioning. So all the settings are inherited from Veeam Backup and Replication. And that's it. Then mount server, review, apply summary, and the repository will be created. So for performance, I have 1 minute remaining. I'd like to just put it on the screen. So in terms of performance, I have like processing rate, but yeah, the bottleneck is still source here. How to check that you have smart entities enabled? We go to the backup job log and see that S3 protocol extension is supported by the target repository. The destination server is my IP address. The next VM goes to another IP address. The next one goes to the next, etc., etc. So with this being said, I should close my session. If you have more questions, drop them to the chat. I will still be here, and yeah, we'll be ready to reply all your questions. If you need more details on the demos, just feel free to ping me, and we can arrange it on one-to-one basis. Thank you for your time, and have a nice day.
Great stuff, Maxim. Thank you very much for that. That was really interesting to see that. That was really good. Like Maxim said, ask your questions in the questions on the sidebar, or if you want to jump into the forums, I'm sure we can sort something out there and get in touch with Maxim.
Thank you.
Okay, let me take this back. Okay, next up we have got. Let me see, screen to share. Yep, so head on up the forums if you want to do some more on that. So next up we have got, I believe it should be Mr. Cade. He should be here. If I make him the presenter now, we should be able to see his screen. You ready to go? There's Michael. Hey Michael, how are you?
All good. How is everyone? I need to be able to. I'll ask if you can share screen. There you go, I've asked.
Yeah, no worries. I'm going to send it to you. There he is. Make presenter. I was just saying earlier on, you were actually our very first UK Veeam user group back in Edinburgh, back in the day, back in 2016.
Yeah, I can't remember. I remember the one that we did in London where I took a certain Veeam product, VAO, I think it was called at the time, and it's had more names than something that's had a lot of names. And I used it to create a disaster recovery using direct restore to AWS or to Azure. And then it took PM 5-6 years later to get to do it actually in the product. But cool, you should be able to see my screen now.
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. How long have I got, Craig?
15-20 minutes.
Cool. Yeah. So basically this session. So first of all, if I haven't met you before, I'm Michael Cade. I've been at Veeam for just over 9 years. I'm a field CTO. I'm a technologist at heart. I started off as an SE. I love creating content, whether it be video demos or blogs that are just useful and helpful for the community. So whenever I get the chance to speak at a Veeam user group or any sort of user group, I'm all up for that. So really what I wanted to focus on, and like I say, I've been at Veeam for 9 years. My focus over the last 3 years has been around cloud native and cloud. Whereas before it was more focused around the virtualization and the storage space. So one of the things that I know that we've been building, and hopefully everyone's aware that we've been building a platform for a number of years and a portfolio of products that allow us to protect multiple different platforms. So I really wanted to hone in on that cloud area, but equally the whole platform, because a lot of people still, when we're out there in the field, when we talk about Veeam, it's the de facto virtualization tool, which is great. And we have some great numbers around like customers that are using us, but there's so much more is really what I want to get at. And obviously, given the world at the moment, or the particular virtualization war at the moment around Broadcom and what they're doing, obviously VMware are a massive partner of ours, and the majority of our customers are on VMware. So it's very important that we keep on helping those customers that stay, but equally we want to make sure that they're aware of other options that Veeam have. So that's a long-winded intro to me, but really 3 things that I want to get across, and if we all walk away with this, then my job is done. The Veeam Data Platform, what is it? And kind of just quickly run over that. But equally, let's hone in on those cloud-based services that we protect and why, and some of the use cases. Data is everywhere. I've got some massively important stats to share with everyone. I know everyone loves a percentage. And then Veeam in 2024, where we're going, what we're doing. And really this session is a precursor to what a session of mine will be at Veeam On. If you're lucky enough to be going out there, then great. But you've still got to come to my session, because I'm going to need all the help I can get, because I think I'm competing with some pretty big names out there. So how it started. So if you remember, obviously Veeam very much was focused on that vSphere, and then quickly after that was Microsoft Hyper-V. I would still say that is where our most feature-rich capabilities lie today, is around that vSphere and that Hyper-V use case. But obviously where we've grown is building out that platform, and how it's going is now you're seeing this new data platform, and even later on I'll talk about VDC, Veeam Data Cloud, as well as another option. But it's not just about virtualization. Virtualization was just the start. We also have physical, which includes physical servers and operating systems such as Linux, Windows, Solaris, AIX, but also unstructured data, object storage. We have enterprise applications, and all of these I'll go through. Some SaaS, some more virtualization hypervisors. Nutanix HV is closely catching up with that Hyper-V and the vSphere. You've seen Red Hat virtualization. You've seen Oracle KVM come out as well recently. There's one more on the hook for Veeam On. I'll let you guess what that is. I'm not going to give it away, because I'm sure this is being recorded. And then also OpenShift virtualization inside of Kubernetes. So then being able to protect cloud, Kubernetes, all of that good stuff. And that over on that left is where I've been living the last 3 and a bit years now. So the data platform, as I mentioned, kind of is marketing do a very good job of using a lot of different icons here, right? AWS, great, tick. Azure, great, tick. Google, tick. Kubernetes, and imagine each one of those platforms are absolutely massive, right? AWS have an insane amount of different services that they run. What is the data on AWS? We pretty much fundamentally are looking at block, file, and object, but then that feeds up into many different services that they have. How do we protect that? Same for vSphere, same for Hyper-V, same for AHV. Like, it's very easy to put our marketing and throw it all onto this one screen, but there's a lot of depth when it comes to all of these different services. So again, another little marketing slide. What do we all protect with the Veeam data platform? And this is just to emphasize, they just started up here with that VMware vSphere and that Microsoft Hyper-V. And over the last, I would say that over the last 7 years, this has exploded in terms of capabilities that we can protect, which also, and we don't just do that because it's cool to protect these platforms, it's because you as customers or partners or alliance vendors are also seeing our customers go to these platforms. So we need a way of being able to protect those workloads, that data, that important stuff when it comes to it. Well done, marketing, for a fantastic slide there. Some more memes to follow, don't worry. Okay, so data is everywhere. I think we all absolutely know this. We hear that data is the yeah, Ian, I just saw you chat. I can't comment on that. Yeah, so data is everywhere. We know how important data is. Data is the new gold mine. Yeah, great stuff. We all know that, right? We need to protect it. So yeah, inside. Oh, so I forgot to put in some marketing. Insert some data stats showing that data is everywhere. Yeah, let's hope that you all know that, right? Data is everywhere, and it is, right? We're all hearing all of these different hypervisors, all these different options to VMware. We're going to move all of that good stuff. We've got databases coming out of our ears. It used to be we just had Microsoft SQL, we had Oracle, and maybe a bit of MySQL or Postgres, and that was kind of our database. We're done. Now we've got all of these different cloud native databases, PaaS-based databases, all of that, all of them different platforms. We've got the public cloud, we've got Kubernetes, which opens up another huge door. If any of you have seen the CNCF landscape, wow, suddenly we've got data literally everywhere, and we have to protect that everywhere as well. So one of the things, I was with our SE group a couple of months ago, actually our sales kickoff, and we were speaking about these particular 3 areas, and you might have heard a Veeam SE or a Veeam person near you speaking to these 3 points and what they mean. So what does data security mean? What does recovery mean? And what does freedom mean? Freedom being very Americanized, right? Freedom, we can move wherever we want and all that good stuff. But what I wanted to do in this session was kind of quickly just go, well, what do these 3 things mean to Veeam today? And what are the capabilities that enable us to say Veeam is all about data security, data recovery, and data freedom? And I think the first and foremost, again, marketing love to lead with security because everyone wants to be a security company these days. I disagree. Our swim lane is protecting data. And until they kick me out the door, I'm going to continue to talk about that. Yes, security is massively important, but I'm going to integrate into the 20, 30 plus year software vendor that has been doing security for that amount of time versus trying to be a security vendor. I'm just going to integrate. And anyway, we'll get to that rant in a minute. So data recovery, we've had instant recovery for many years, and we've just been adding on to that, right? In the session at Veeam, I hope to put a bit of more demos on this. I don't have enough time today. But when we think about instant recovery, it started off with instant virtual machine recovery. Now we've got the ability to take any of those image-based backups and instantly recover them to VMware, to Hyper-V, to Nutanix AHV as well. We've equally got the ability to instantly recover databases as well into new locations via that same instant capability. Same for instant NAS recovery, instant unstructured data. So we back up our NFS, our SMB, our file share servers. We can instantly have them available from the backup storage as well. So lots of great stuff from that instant recovery perspective. Also being able to dive in fact, one more instant, because it's what I've been working on, is the instant first-class disk inside of Kubernetes. You've got a Kubernetes cluster running on top of vSphere. Might be Tanzu, might just be a couple of Ubuntu machines, but you're leveraging the vSphere CSI. We've got the ability to do an instant FCD recovery. Same under the hood. We're using vPower NFS. We're mounting that up into the hypervisor, getting things back up and running, and then you use storage vMotion to bring it back into production. We've also got that granular exposure, so being able to use our explorers on those databases, but also files and all of that good stuff. So again, recovery of either we're recovering things really quickly or instantly, we're recovering only what you need. And this is, again, these aren't new concepts, that we've just got them across multiple platforms that we now protect. Databases, a huge importance around databases. You've seen us move the configuration database to Postgres, but then also you've seen us work alongside like bringing out the Veeam Explorer for Postgres and being able to run the instant database recovery there as well, and what you've seen from a Microsoft SQL perspective and being able to integrate into the management studio, all of that good stuff. It's all focused around recovery and protection of those workloads. Also, it wouldn't be a session even now, even though I'm still cloud and cloud native focused, I still beat that same drum about verification of your backups. Sure backup, virtual labs, leveraging data, all of that good stuff. Getting that tick in the box, checking against the VM, the app, and the OS, and getting a nice little shiny report to go, look, my backups are good, and taking the heat off you if anything else goes wrong. Okay, now we'll go back to security, because this is, remember what I said, is that we're not a security company. We're not going to pretend to be. Marketing might put out a little bit more about security on that front, but really, what can we do in that data security story? And one is about being able to offer that right of bang remediation. How do we make sure that your backups are in the most secure possible format so that they cannot be tampered with? How can we provide the ability so when you do have to remediate something, you can scan that on the way through, making sure that it's not bad, doesn't have any malicious activity. We provide best practice. Our documentation is, but like, I'm going to be biased here, but I still think that the Veeam documentation across the board is still one of the best in the industry. We're integrating into Yara to be able to bring that into, so you're scanning your backup data to understand what's in it, if there's anything malicious in it, and integration. So I speak about right of bang down the bottom there is bad. The bad thing is the bang. What's the right of the bang is about bad things have happened. We need to get things back up and running as fast as possible, leveraging that data recovery tab that I just touched on. How do we make sure that our backups are immutable in there? And then how do we make sure that we're securely restoring everything and we're not infecting, again, our recovery process? Best practice, how do we do that? But then equally on the left-hand side is how do we integrate into, or how do we leverage Yara for inline scanning to make sure that we're not backing up bad data? But also, how do we integrate into the likes of Sophos or Progress Flowmon from a network detection? And then when we see smoke signals, how can we leverage them to say, all right, we need either another backup, we need to start a restore potentially into another location, maybe it's into a cloud, all of them things. But we're not a security company. I'm just going to integrate into Sophos. Sophos have been around for as long as I've been in the industry, and they do this security thing pretty well. So I'm gonna hang my hat on their capabilities. Data freedom, I hate the term data freedom. It was so much better when it was portability from us, being able to provide a portability for our backups. What does it mean? It means mobility, right? That VBK format that we have, the ability to be able to restore that really wherever you want, whether that is instantly into a Hyper-V host or into VMware or into Nutanix HV from a physical machine backup, or being able to go and see what it looks like in AWS or Azure, and being able to provide that mobility. It doesn't necessarily mean migration, because I probably wouldn't use Veeam as that migration tool, but it allows me to at least have a look at what something might look like there. How can we leverage that? So then, okay, we're going to use that mobility story, but then how can I leverage that data that is now running in AWS to get some information out of that? Again, I told you about me loving that terminology around being able to leverage that data. The file format, the VBK format. Now, this is only really applicable for that image-based backups that we have, but ultimately, any of our image-based backups land in that VBK format, which means we can do all of that recovery task like that, or bring that back into wherever it wants to be. And it comes down to that, what is the choice there? It comes down to people don't know where they're going to be in a year's time from an infrastructure point of view. maybe in life, maybe in careers, but it comes down to choice. Well, I don't know if I'm going to be on vSphere in 90 days time or 900 days time. I don't know if I'm going to be in the cloud. I don't know if I'm going to be here, there, or anywhere. I want to make sure that my backup that I have to keep forever because I'm in public sector, I need to make sure that I've got choice to be able to still recover that data wherever it needs to be. So this is me transitioning a little bit into what. So okay, that's great. You've kind of covered the platform. You've covered the three big topic areas, big ticket items that we kind of talk about. It's quite fitting that my name is Michael Cade, not Michael Caine, but I found this. I thought it was funny. How long have I got, Craig?
You've got about 2 or 3 minutes, mate.
Cool. So when we focus on that cloud like column, and this is where that session will go into a lot more detail here, is that there's a lot of services in the cloud like I touched on. So when it comes to AWS, what do we have? What can we protect for our customers out there? And a lot of even our own SEs still believe that, oh, we protect EC2 instances. But actually, there's so much more. You can see everything in there. EFS, file servers, VPC, so your configuration, your network configuration in the cloud, RDS, so managed databases, same as Amazon DynamoDB. I'm not going to go through what they all are. The ability to protect unstructured data in object storage, not just a place to throw your backups now. It's also a place that people are running first-class workloads. And then EKS as well. You're going to see a trend here. Yep, virtual machines, managed SQL, managed databases, network configuration, file shares, blob storage, Kubernetes. Same for Google. And then from a Kubernetes point of view, you're going to see a load more. But again, it's all about that choice. It's about that flexibility of that. So yeah, there's a lot going on. The other thing that I wanted to quickly touch on, because it's important and we've been announcing stuff around it, is obviously the Veeam data platform is all about choice, and it's about how our customers, how our service providers can go and provide that as a service, or be able to provide that capability about being able to protect their workloads. And why? The key part is the Veeam data platform enables you as a customer to go and deploy all of the Veeam technologies and leverage all of them yourself, manage all of them yourself. Or you could go off to a service provider, a VCSP, a Veeam Cloud Service Provider, and you could offload some of that responsibility, whether it be I'm going to send my backups into a service provider, or I'm going to leverage them for DR as a service, or the hand holding and just the peace of mind that we've got some experts on hand. Or there's some where we want to actually send our backups to a Veeam location, and that started off with the Microsoft 365 capability, and then into Azure, and then more recently being able to send your backups to the Veeam first-party solution. Now, none of them have gone away. It's all about choice. It's all about, like, do you want to manage it all yourself? Do you want to send it into a Veeam first-party solution that, by the way, is considerably higher priced than any Veeam Cloud Service Provider? Or do you want to go down the road and be able to use a trusted advisor that you've known and worked with for many years? So that's really the Veeam Data Cloud. In terms of where we are today, the Veeam Data Cloud, it's us, we host it, it's everything to do with us. Today, it's about Microsoft 365, it's about Azure, all of those services that we just touched on, as well as this Veeam Vault, which is the ability to send your Veeam backups in. And with that should be me done. I'll be around for questions. Hopefully I wasn't talking too quick. I know I was, but I just wanted to get all of that out. So thank you.
Thanks, Michael. That was great. Thank you for that. Just in that last, go back one slide.
Oh, hang on.
So it's very weighted to the left there with 3. There's an empty space to the right of Vault. I know you're going to say, but I'm guessing we can expect a few more of those in the coming months, years on that as the platform builds.
Yeah, absolutely right. So if you think about these as well, they're all based on Veeam technologies already. So yes, absolutely. There's a roadmap. There's a lofty goal of roadmap features that comes out for Veeam Data Cloud.
Cool. Thank you for that. as Michael said, he's going to be around for a little while, so any questions you have, or fire them over into the community forums. The links are on the screen just as I get my screen up. Mr. Sanderson, are you ready to go just shortly?
Sure am, yep.
Okay, so let me just, so that was Michael. So yeah, head on over to the forums if you want to say, add to the conversation or ask any questions, feedback, etc. on that session. Ian, I know you've got a hard stop at past, so we'll quickly jump over to your session. I'm going to make you presenter and let you run things.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you, Ian.
Yep. That's sharing?
Yeah, you can see that, okay?
Yeah, cool. Okay, so yeah, so quick introduction. My name's Ian Sanderson, as we covered at the start of the session, one of the Veeam user group leaders, product manager at 1111 Systems, and a Veeam Vanguard. So that's why I didn't plan this, but my session follows on very nicely from the 3 M's, the 2 Michaels and the Maxim, on object storage and security, and I'm going to focus on immutability towards the end of this session. So as has been the case with all of the other sessions, if there's any questions, please drop them in the chat, and well, I'll get some at the end of this session, hopefully. So this is more of a high-level session, and I'm going to dive into just some stats of what the current landscape looks like in terms of threats out there, why data security is important, where does Veeam fit in, and then I want to talk a little bit more about immutability. So we've seen 2 sessions today already on object storage. My focus will be immutability with object storage. So yeah, Michael Cade, or Michael Cairn, as you were trying to call yourself. You said you like some stats, so here we go. This isn't any scaremongering exercise or anything like that. It's just the facts, and you can see the sources where we'll grab these figures from. But year over year, we see cybercrime on the rise, and this is really why there's the new hotness in the, I guess, across all the industry to pivot and become a security vendor as well as a data protection vendor. So Michael touched on it in his last session there. I'll touch on it some more in my session, but this is why there's 72% increase in cyber attacks in 2023. You can see the cost there. Is that you, Jim Jones, popping in? Yeah, average cost of recovery, $4.45 million. Imagine that. Could you afford that? And then 76% of businesses experienced at least one ransomware attack in 2023. And that one in particular, I found very interesting. So if you take a look at the Veeam Data Protection Trends report, it was actually 25% of those customers had 4, 5, 6 or more ransomware attacks. It's absolutely insane. So yeah, what are criminals doing to actually cause harm to you, the end user, your customer, your company, your data ultimately? Like what's going on there? So we can see the stats there on screen. 82% of breaches involve data stored in cloud environments. So don't think moving data to the cloud is a silver bullet to protecting your data. I know that's a common thought process when moving stuff like email and things to Microsoft 365. You know, it's now Microsoft's problem. It's absolutely not. Data is still your responsibility to protect. 94% of organizations reported an email data breach, and you can read the rest of the stats there. What I wanted to cover, and what I didn't put on this page, but there's a great document out there. So some of you may know that the British Library suffered a huge ransomware attack last year. And if you Google this, British Library ransomware attack, the first hit you should see is a full PDF document white paper on exactly what happened in that attack, what steps they took to try and remedy the situation, and what steps they're taking to move forward from that ransomware attack. And I say this all the time, if you dig into that white paper, it's always something really simple that you would have thought would have been covered and protected already. So I think in that case it was OpenRDP to the internet, and the attackers got in that way, sat there for a few weeks, figured out what was on the network, and then, you know, went nuts in the environment and deleted a load of data. Luckily, they did have some backups to recover from, but you can imagine the chaos that would cause with all systems offline. But yeah, I recommend you check that one out. Just Google British Library ransomware attack and it'll come up. But anyway, enough stats. So why is data security important? So I've just mentioned downtime there with the British Library. We saw the cost of, you know, $4 million plus average cost of recovery. But you know, there's also your reputation at stake here as well. Like, and that's not a ransomware attack, but British Airways, as an example, is often down because of system issues. You know, it doesn't inspire confidence in the widget or the solution or whatever it is, what web presence you have, that you're offline because you haven't performed the due diligence to try and ensure that, you know, the systems you're protecting is as protected as they can possibly be. But other than that, in more recent years, there's more compliance regulations that need to be met. Like, you need to demonstrate to, well, I've got insurance as the next one, but insurance vendors now, like cybersecurity insurance, you have to demonstrate that you've taken reasonable steps to ensure that data is protected and you can recover from that data. But also if you work with other organizations, so like business to business type of deals, there's more and more requirements now to prove that you adhere to some kind of framework like Cyber Essentials Plus. So I forget the name of the UK equivalent, like the NIST 2 standards, you know, all those kind of things. So this is why the security is important. And as I put that in paper, you don't want that brown stuff to hit the fan, otherwise you're in for a world of pain. So where does Veeam fit in on this? So Michael Cade touched on this in his last session. I tend to agree with his analysis that maybe you should leave the security piece to those vendors who've been in the place for a long time. Now, Veeam is bringing some valuable additions to the resilience of your data, but it should be part of a wider approach to protect all the data. So yeah, firewalls in place, all of your XDR stuff's in place. Like, you know, you've taken reasonable steps to protect the data. The data protection platform should be one of the last lines of defense to ensure recoverability of that data. But yeah, I chose resilience there because I think Veeam's tagline at the moment is radical resilience, so some cool marketing term like that. But yeah, Michael touched on this already, but yeah, you've got proactive threat hunting, immutability I'm going to dive into a little bit deeper, and then secure access. So Veeam has taken steps to make it more difficult to gain access to your Veeam infrastructure. So you can enable multi-factor authentication, all of that good stuff. But the proactive threat hunting, Veeam have made leaps and bounds, I think, even though it should be in addition to your other security technologies. So the Yara rule stuff, so that's something you can use as in a secure restore scenario. If you're familiar with instant recovery, it leverages that technology, spin up the backup, scan it with the Yara rule, try and figure out if there's anything within that virtual machine that matches these patterns that have been defined in the Yara rule. If it's yes, then you can mark that as a suspect backup, and then maybe you don't want to recover from that backup in the future. There's other things in place as well, like early threat detection. So Veeam can scan backups in line as the backup's actually going on, and detect things that way as well, and alert you to those situations occurring. And then If you choose to, that can all be pumped out into a SIM system with syslog integration or any of that good stuff. So yeah, that is what's come in version 12. So that additional focus on security. So what I wanted to look at was immutability. My initial thought for this session was to look at how Veeam defines immutability and what it is you need to do in terms of sizing a backup set for that. But I thought I'd go a bit higher level and just cover off what it is, because not everyone knows what these technical things are that we've seen in these previous sessions. Great though they are, I think it's good to have some context around it as well. So immutability, you can see this is the Cambridge Dictionary definition: the state of not changing or being unable to be changed. Makes sense. If you think about it, this isn't a new technology. Like, we've had worm tapes, or write once, read many. You've had CDs that you could burn in the day. Going back to floppy disks, you could flip the little tab on the disk to make it read only. It's not a new concept, it's just the word we're using today. And in particular, what I'm going to talk about is how that applies to object storage. So, immutability with object storage, what is it? You may have seen these terms before: compliance or governance. So they are functions of object lock retention modes. Now, I'm using the AWS S3 definition. So most object storage vendors, bar a few, cough Microsoft, follow the S3 standard. It's not an official standard, that's up for much debate in the industry, but most technologies say they are S3 compliant. Even Veeam itself, if you go to add an object storage repository, if it's not one of those vendors who are explicitly called out, you'll see it says S3 compliant. But yeah, getting back to what I was talking about, so compliance or governance. The difference between the two is compliance is once you set a time period of which that data will be immutable. So say you want the data to be unchangeable for 10 days, you can't do anything with that data for 10 days. There's no secret backdoor in there to delete the data. You just can't do it. Whereas some other solutions that say they're offering immutability, that might just be a tick box in the user interface where you can't delete data via the UI. This is a true, once you set it, it's tough. Like, if you set 25 years and you think, oh yeah, that should have been 25 days. Yeah, well, look, you stuck with it for 25 years. Whereas governance mode, I guess you could think of this as maybe it's even the trial mode, but it's got the same integration as compliance mode, but certain users can override retention settings or delete the data. And then you might think to yourself, well, what's the point of that? And I tend to agree with that. But there are certain situations where you want to lock down most users, but still have that flexibility to delete that data. So moving on, how does it work with Veeam? So I've called out two examples here. One's Veeam Backup and Replication, and one is Veeam Backup for Microsoft 365 version 7. I'll tell you why I called out version 7. But in both products, it's a function of the object storage that's been added to Veeam itself. So you define the immutability settings on the object storage when you add it in there. And once it's added, you can either create a repository with that from within M365 backup, so Veeam 365, or that's your settings there for direct to object in Veeam Backup and Replication. Slight differences between the two. Veeam Backup and Replication, you can see there, it's set to 30 days in this example. It's a maximum of 90. Whereas in Veeam Backup and 365, the immutability period matches the retention of the backup job itself. So if you've asked to keep data for 1 year, the immutability period is 1 year. Now, the reason I call out version 7 is that's only applicable on backup copy jobs. Karinne might cover some differences in that in version 8 in her session after this, but that's how it works now. So it's important to think about what it is actually the organization requires in terms of immutability and how long you want to keep data for, and the reasons for that. So I guess just rewinding slightly, one of the main reasons for immutability is to protect against those threats we discussed at the beginning of this call, particularly like a malicious attacker trying to delete data before then performing any other kind of malicious action on your systems. It's one of the last lines of defense. The attacker clicks delete on the backup. Actually, the backup's still there because no one can delete it. And this is one of the reasons why I think you should use compliance mode, not governance mode. There's other things to consider that, but I know we're getting pretty short on time. So block generation, this is what I said I wanted to talk about initially. And it's not very clear in the Veeam documentation how to define the actual retention points and storage required when enabling immutability with Veeam backup replication. So I pulled this from, right, the Veeam website itself. So the retention is the job retention, so say it was 7 days, plus the immutability period, so this example is 3 days, and then there's something called block generation, which is an additional 10 days of backup points you need to account for. And the reason for that is it minimizes IO operations and updates to any backup chains. So imagine you're writing to a public cloud provider like AWS or Azure or Google Cloud or whoever. You're probably fully aware that there's additional costs associated with each read, write, put, get, delete in there. The point of that is to try and minimize that, but you need to account for additional 10 days. Now, this diagram, I'm just going to call this out quickly. It's quite a cool feature. If you've ever used an online drawing tool called Excalibur, they've got an AI section there, so you can write in what you want it to draw, and it'll just draw it. So like I created this little thing in about 30 seconds. Check it out. So 1 minute left. I think I'll get this done in 1 minute. Is the help with all of this, so going back to block generation, figuring out some of the sizing, what you actually need to store data and make it immutable. Veeam's been working on updating their sizing tools recently. Still not perfect, I'll be honest, but there's made leaps and bounds in making this better. So check it out, veeam.com/calculators, and you can see here we have options for writing direct to object storage if you want to make it immutable. And then the output is how much storage would be required. And what is it? I pasted the wrong screenshot on there. That's terrible. Anyway, what that should have shown was it would then give an estimate of API costs, the size of infrastructure that would be required to run the environment for that. And then the last piece, which I'll call out, is missing the immutability and block generation, but how many restore points that would require. 1 minute over, so thank you. I also spoke quickly, but I hope that gave a good high-level overview of why security is important and how immutability should play into your data protection strategy. Thanks.
Nice, thanks for that, Ian. I'd hope there's going to be a conversation in the forums about that, because security is probably, if not the top, one of the top feature requests or discussion points, hot topics, etc. at the moment. So yeah, carry on the conversation back in the forums. Good stuff. Okay, so next up, I believe, let me just share my screen. Rin, just get ready. I'm going to make you present just shortly for the last session of the day. So yeah, carry on the conversation on Ian's session if you want to in the community forums. And then Rin, you're up next. Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 version 8. I'm just going to make you presenter.
Oh, wow, it's my time already.
Thanks for joining us. So, Rin's on, as we said, on eastish coast of America, so it's early morning for Rin. So thanks for joining us all that way.
I mean, we're a couple hours in. I've had a coffee or two. We're getting to listen to everyone else. It's been good. All right, let's figure out what screen I'm willing to share. And how's it look on your side?
That looks good. Good.
All right. So I do have to admit to a slight failure on my side. I will not be able to show you a lab today, but I want to take you through a Veeam backup for Microsoft 365 experience because it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So to kick off a little bit, if you don't already know who I am, my name is Karinne Bessette. I am a technologist with Veeam Software. If you're at all interested in most of the slides that are in this presentation, any information about some of the other presentations I do, that link tree will take you to Sway pages with access to the slides, access to Veeam links, and pretty much anything you've seen as topics in the slide today, you could probably find within this link for informational takeaways. Since we're talking about a user group, we all have personal likes and interests. I have my fluffy kitties, gaming, and of course, climbing. Here very soon, since we had Object First here on the webcast, I'm happy to say I'll be on the Object First podcast talking about one of these activities, and you should definitely check out their podcast to see if you're interested in any of that. So let's jump right in. We had a lot of great statistics in the last reel, and I am a huge fan of statistics because statistics are what you use in order to get management to give you money to do your projects. Now, these all across the board are great statistics, and on the left-hand side, the majority of these actually come from a report that ran from 2021 to 2022. And inside of this report, they investigated cloud-only attacks. So we're talking PaaS, IaaS, and SaaS. And what they detected from these reports is that there was an increase in dwell time and time that they're able to gather data, and then the consequences from these types of events. And one of my favorite statistics, if you need another reason to go look at this report, is that from 2020 to 2021, they saw a 50% increase in change in upper management as a side effect to some kind of attack that they've had in their cloud environment. Meaning you are not the only one in the hot seat. If you have something happen, you have your upper management that is also in that hot seat with you for mitigation into reasons why this could have been mitigated. So if you're struggling getting money, you might pull up this report and say that you are all equal stakeholders in this adventure. So those that are familiar, or maybe if you're not familiar with the Microsoft 365 side, we like to create goals. And this is a product that covers Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Microsoft Teams. But with these, the differentiators are we like to give you options in whatever storage, wherever you want to store, and however you want to store so that you can make business sense of these backup processes. Depending on what your SLAs are, you have all kinds of options. We have a ton of service providers out there, and we even offer our own in-house BaaS, so you can have backup as a service directly through vendor resources. This really gives you back your control. I work a lot in the Microsoft 365 environment. I've been with Veeam for 7 or 8 years now. I've been working pretty exclusively with the Microsoft 365 about 6 of those years. And I say that where I actually go out into the Microsoft 365 committee. I'm a certified MCT. And I can tell you from my experience, it is so easy to delete data inside of the environment in a way that is non-recoverable. I do it all the time in my lab for testing purposes so that I can create a clean slate to work off of. So being mindful of how you can get data back in the kinds of scenarios you can't, you kind of start to realize anything that comes through the front door and has any amount of privilege in your environment, and even if you're just wiping out user data, you're still going to need to have control of an additional copy of that data. Then we get to flexibility. I have the innate pleasure of working with our competitive intelligence team, and we get to try out all of the competition. And one of the things that I like to do is go in and check out all of the restore processes and how you can do it. And I can safely say we actually do have one of the best out there on the market for different ways you can restore data and the granularity behind that. Now, that was my marketing pitch for the day. Now we're going to get into some of the features. I think it's important to highlight the things that we can already do within this product. And that includes our backup copy, where we can go from any object storage to any object storage and place that immutability on that backup copy that Ian was alluding to. We'll also talk a little bit about some of the features that are coming with that and a little bit on the monitoring side. Our monitoring in this most recent version is now inside of Veeam 1. So you can actually do this today where you can monitor your proxies, your repositories, and there's over 10 alarms in there right now. You have what I like to call the coffee window on that side, which is this nice color-coded window where you can wake up, look at it, and if it's not screaming red at you, you can probably safely go on with your day and let the coffee set in before you tackle any of your issues. Another feature I like to talk about is probably one of the most underrated features in our console. One of the number one questions we get when it comes to compliance is, okay, so how do I prevent administrators from just going out there and restoring whatever data they want without any kind of visibility whatsoever? And we've actually had this API in our console for a few versions now, which you can tap in and get a complete discography of all of the restore types that are happening in your infrastructure and who logged in to perform those restores. Now, in our next version, and this is sort of a sneak peek, inside of Veeam 1, we're going to have additional alarms that are going to be accessing this API. So you'll have automated built-in views of that. This is a nice, pretty infographic for all of the restores. If you're interested in this infographic and taking another look at it, that link provided earlier should have a copy of that. And this will be provided online for you to take a deeper look at from our portal. So we had a lot of talk about Veeam. And I know a lot of people on this call are going to be coming to Veeam, but if you haven't already signed up or you're not sure what Veeam is, then Veeam is our convention we run every year. I want to say there's a giant party, and if you know, you know. And there's a discount code on here if you haven't already signed up and bought your ticket. It'll be Ricatron10, and it'll give you 10% off to be able to make that journey over and see this event. What I'm sharing with you today in the sneak peek features for version 8 is only a drop of thimble in the super secret session that's going to actually be run by product management on our side for what's coming in our next version and a discography of that. And it will not be posted online. So you'll have to wait until the day it drops in order to see any further information from that. All right, so these are the sneak peek features. There are definitely more features coming than what I am allowed to talk about since this is getting posted publicly. But the first thing I can talk about is we're going to have a lot of enhancements around our proxies. First of all, and probably one of my favorite, is we are giving into Linux proxies. If you've been with Veeam for a while, you know we originally had that put into our Veeam backup for Veeam backup and replication. Now it's coming to the Veeam backup for Microsoft 365. And with this, we're going to also add what we call proxy pools, which means you're going to be able to use multiple proxies in order to process data to the repository, which will help you create some backup efficiencies and some redundancy in your infrastructure so that you don't have any problems with components going down. We also have security enhancements. First of all, with our storage. we can today do backup copy immutability, but in our next version, we're going to be able to do immutability on that primary copy. And that's going to give you multiple layers of immutability with the same level of technology that we add to all of our products when it comes to that immutability. The next thing is going to be something around the console, and I actually can't say a lot more about that, and I really wish I could tell you guys. I do recommend, if you can make it to Veeam On, check out that secret session. It's going to be run by Mike Ressler, and I will be sitting in there to see what he tells you guys, so I know what I'm allowed to talk to you guys about next. And I kept it short and sweet for us here, so we'd have plenty of time for questions, and I'll answer the questions that I am allowed to answer here.
Thanks, Karinne. So the one question from Dippin, this might be a controversial one, so you can plead the fifth on this one if you want to, but here we go. So, question is, what is your opinion on Microsoft Backup offering they are including as an option in Microsoft 365? So I'm guessing this is the introduction of Microsoft announcing that they're going to offer their own integrated backups as part of their 365 tenancy.
So Microsoft Backup is actually a backup storage API that we'll be able to tap into. Now this backup, we're already a named partner and it's being currently integrated into a build of our product. It is still beta on the Microsoft 365 side as well. And the way that I see it is we have multiple layers of protection, and it really depends on the SLA that you're willing to have for the restoration in your environment and what kind of restoration you're going to expect in your environment. You have different solutions for different problems. It's going to be expensive for the Microsoft 365 backup if you're going to be saving long-term data. And if you're able to integrate it into our product, you could have multiple tiers of backups, kind of like we do already with the primary object storage and then the low cost object storage. You'll have another layer on top of that. I like to compare this to storage snapshots that you see with storage appliances. Yes, that is a great first line of defense for the best SLA that you're going to find for data recovery. But it's also vulnerable to many of the other attacks that could happen in your environment if you get any type of administrative permissions breached, or insider attacks, unfortunately, can be a thing.
Reply, that was I expected diplomatic as you could be, I guess.
Was that diplomatic? I'm excited about it.
Excited. Yeah. Anything else? I don't think I've got anything else. Just checking through the comments or the chat or anything. No, don't think there's anything else. Question from Maxim. What would be expected terabyte per day with that API?
That is an excellent question, and I am not allowed to answer on this. It's in the works. There are negotiations with Microsoft. Microsoft will have a price, and we'll have a price probably as a partner, I believe. I don't know specifics on that one yet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, fair comment. Thanks. Any more questions? Anybody else wanted to put anything into the chat quickly before we round out Karinne's session here? No, speak now or forever hold your peace.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for putting not too early, hopefully, for you.
Nah, it's fine.
Nah, good. Okay, let me take this back then. Just remember, if you want to continue the conversation, Dip's question about what your thoughts on Microsoft Backup, that's a good conversation piece in the community forums. Check it out over there. If I share this, that's my screenshot from right there. Okay, final round of Q&A. So I guess we've got just under 15 minutes. We try and fill if we can. Feel free to ask any questions, any comments, any feedback, any questions from any of the sessions today, or anything in general. Feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try our best endeavours to answer them or kick off a discussion as part of that. While you're thinking that up and typing away frantically the question, because I know you're all dying to ask questions, just want to bring to your attention a couple of dates for your diaries moving forward. So this is obviously our first virtual meetup for 2024. Our next planned virtual event is week commencing the 17th of July. It's most likely going to be the 18th of July, but we've got a couple of things we want to just confirm first before we commit to that date. So it's definitely the week commencing 17th of July. It'll be roughly the same time, about 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. in the afternoon for the UK folks on that one. And then the most important one, I guess you're all dying to know about, is the next in-person event. So the idea is we lead up to an in-person event at the end of the year. At this moment in time, the only thing we can really commit to is it's end of November. Location, most likely to be London. I know that might be a bit disappointing for some of the people based in the north of England or like me up in Scotland, etc. But London's just from an accessibility, transport hubs, locations, etc., concentration of population, all that kind of thing. Yep, that's going to be where it's going to be. Location within there, we've got a couple of things on the go. We'll firm that up later in the year. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll have something a bit more firm to give you and commit to you on the next virtual event in mid-July on that one. I want to say, not quite ending it just yet, but thank you for attending today. We're just going to go and quickly check to see if there's any questions. Depends on the questions today. For those using object storage, do you take into account portability from one provider to another? And I guess this touches on something that Michael Cade, the Veeam format being quite portable, data mobility being important. So yeah, any feedback on any of those? Jump in. Lewis is saying we use Wasabi too, but they do have the option to move buckets between providers. Good to know, Lewis. Good to know. Any follow-up discussions? Let's take them at the community forums. Let's get the UK community forum being the busiest and the most talkative in there. It keeps the people in the background happy, keeps them busy. And with that, I need to thank the people in the background. So Sophia and Maddie, who work with the community teams inside Veeam, have been invaluable in helping set up these events, setting up the platforms, getting us going, keeping us going, providing the slides, etc. Without them, really, we can't have these kind of events. So a huge thank you for that. If there's no further questions, everyone.
Craig, just one thing quick before we wrap there. Obviously, we're talking about the upcoming events. I think it'd be a good thing as well just to say to everyone, look, call for papers. Obviously, you've heard some of the topics that have been presented from obviously Object First and people at Veeam and ourselves, but it's not just for us to talk out. This is a forum. This is for everyone to share what they've found. If you've got a topic that you want to talk about, whether you've never done this before or whether you spend every waking moment blogging and podcasting and vlogging and all the rest of it, ultimately for the virtual and for the in-person, we will obviously want to hear what you got to say. So consider this a call for papers. Reach out to myself, Craig, Ian, with any ideas that you've got, and we'd love to have it for a future event.
Absolutely. And just to emphasize on what Michael said there, if it's your first time, reach out to us. We can offer support, guidance and support. We've all been there. We've all been first-time talkers, etc. Trust me, once you do your first one, you become addicted and you want to do it more and more. So if there's any guidance, support, advice, etc. we can offer, please, as Michael says, reach out to any of the leaders, whether it's on the forums or any of the social medias on that. We're more than happy to help and facilitate a full support mechanism for you to get your first talk underway in public. Would be fantastic. Any other questions in the chat? I can't see anything. Michael, I don't know if you see anything in the chat as part of that. Nothing on there. Okay, so
everything.
If you do think of something after the event, which 99% of the time people do, they go away and think, I wish I'd asked that. Jump in the conversation back in the community forums, continue the conversations there, or start some of your conversations on your own in the forums, start your new posts, etc. And we'd love to hear some kind of feedback or comments about today's event, any improvements or anything you'd like to see changed or added to the agenda. And with that, I think we'll call it a day. Let's call it Wednesday.